Hello, everyone. Today's commentary addresses the global persecution of Christianity and Christians. It's called Thrown to the Lions. We begin with a quotation which reads, "The wicked flee when no man pursueth, but the righteous are bold as a lion." That's from Proverbs chapter 28, verse 1. Well, many Christians in the Western world peacefully celebrated Christmas this past year. Most of them had absolutely no idea what is happening to their brothers and sisters on the far side of the globe. The stark reality is that most Christians now live in countries where they are violently persecuted. Believers are being rounded up for deprogramming in China. Churches are being burned by Hindu extremists in India, and Christians are literally being hacked to pieces by Islamic radicals in some parts of Africa. Practicing your faith can be a death sentence in certain areas of the Middle East, and North Korean concentration camps are full of those suspected of worshiping Jesus Christ. Perhaps if we face similar levels of persecution here, believers in the West would begin to become much more serious about restoring and cherishing our faith. More than 1 billion people live in China, and persecution of Christians there has risen to an unprecedented level this past year. Recently, dozens of Christians were arrested in China as authorities launched a widespread crackdown on unregistered house churches, even offering cash rewards for information leading to capture of faith leaders who are now treated as fugitives from justice. A report from International Christian Concern, or ICC, says that an ongoing massive campaign by Chinese police in and around Wenzhou City and Zhejiang Province resulted in detainment and arrest of more than 100 local house church members between the 13th and 18th of December of 2025. This crackdown included checkpoints, police patrols, cash rewards being posted for the capture of house church leaders. Christianity in China generally takes shape in two different settings: government controlled churches and unregistered house worship. Legal churches are allowed to operate openly, but must register with state run religious bodies and accept ongoing oversight, including limits upon preaching, leadership appointments, and youth participation. For example, individuals under the age of 18 were prohibited from attending Christmas services this year. Sermons and lessons in state approved churches must align teaching and church life with CCP rules. Consequently, millions of Christians in China worship in house churches, which meet without official approval. These clandestine meetings often occur in homes or secret gathering places and are thus vulnerable to raids, fines, and arrests, particularly since authorities now view them as growing too large or influential. The Chinese government, led and controlled by the CCP, considers Christianity a burgeoning threat to the state's authority. It therefore wages an intense campaign of persecution against house churches that do not toe the line by becoming state-led religious bodies. These recent arrests follow months of mounting pressure on Chinese Christians, as local officials increasingly target house church leaders. Authorities there have pushed to reshape church life by mandating display of communist imagery, stripping away traditional Christian symbols such as crosses, and enforcing communist-driven indoctrination. In September, the CCP rolled out new online regulations for religious clergy. These rules prohibit unapproved religious teaching, live streams, online courses, and commercial activity on social media. Last month, over 1,000 law enforcement personnel were involved in the massive operation that resulted in the arrest of hundreds of Chinese Christians. Starting on the 13th of December, the CCP mobilized more than 1,000 police officers, SWAT units, anti-riot forces, and firefighters in the Zhejiang province's Yeyang town in Wenzhou City, raiding churches and conducting mass arrests of Christians. Belongings of relevant individuals were illegally confiscated, Roads leading to the church were blocked by police, and Christians were unable to even enter the Yang church. The operation lasted nearly 5 days, and yet no public statement was issued by CCP officials. Within just the first 2 days, several hundred people were taken away for questioning. Restrictions on the Christian faith in China just keep getting tighter. No one under the age of 18 is even permitted to attend church. Adults are only allowed to go to churches that are officially registered and controlled by the state. Anyone daring to defy these rules risks being subjected to arrest and deprogramming. The U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, or USCIRF, and other religious liberty watchdogs have repeatedly warned that the totalitarian CCP regime is enacting human rights abuses against religious groups in China. An USCIRF report from December details mass arrests and destruction or removal of church property as part of CCP President Xi Jinping's sinicization of religion policy. Religious groups and leaders who do not register with the official government-approved religious organizations are often arrested, imprisoned, and forced into anti-cult programs to deprogram Christians. Well, in India, it is Hindu extremists who are doing the persecuting. They have literally burned down hundreds of churches in recent years. In other cases, mobs of Hindu extremists stormed churches and start attacking worshipers. Last year, a mob of 200 such extremists stormed a church and beat worshipers there with iron rods. More recently, an extremist mob in northern India viciously assaulted a small group of Christians and forced them to burn a large pile of Bibles and other Christian literature. It is like a scene out of 1930s Nuremberg, only the faces have changed. Nearly 100 Hindu extremists searched their car, pulled out 80 Bibles and tracts, and cast them onto the ground into the heap. They shot videos showing the two shocked and disoriented Christian couples forced to repeat that they intended to convert to Hinduism and that they would never return. The mob then kicked the Bibles and spoke disrespectfully about Christ. A Christian pastor was forced to write a letter of apology, and the video shows it in his hand. One of the mob then took a bottle of flammable liquid from the hands of a boy standing nearby and forced 3 of the Christians to sprinkle it onto the pile of Bibles. After forcing the pastor to set the Bibles afire, the mob then shouted praises to the Hindu god known as Rama. In Nigeria, many thousands of Christians have been slaughtered this year alone. The situation there is so dire that President Trump felt compelled to issue a warning that he would do something about Islamic terrorists who are mass killing Christians there. On Christmas Day, he was as good as his word and posted about his swift action on Truth Social. Quote, "Tonight, at my direction as Commander-in-Chief, the United States launched a powerful and deadly strike against ISIS terrorist scum in northwest Nigeria, who have been targeting and viciously killing primarily innocent Christians at levels not seen for many years, even centuries. I have previously warned these terrorists that if they did not stop the slaughtering of Christians, there would be hell to pay. And tonight, there was. We must all pray that this will do at least something to stop the bloodshed. So far in 2025, Islamic terrorists in Nigeria have killed over 12,000 people. Violence in the Northwest region where the U.S. strikes occurred is largely driven by armed bandits and gangs kidnapping for ransom. The insurgency is concentrated in the Northeast, where jihadist groups like the notorious Boko Haram and its now more powerful splinter, the Islamic State of West Africa Province, an affiliate of the Islamic State group, have killed tens of thousands of civilians over the past decade. Nigeria is not officially at war, but more people are killed there than in most war-torn countries. Collectively, more than 3 billion people live in the 3 nations we have mentioned thus far. That is more than a third of the Earth's total human population. However, The persecution happening in smaller nations like North Korea and Eritrea is much, much worse. Henrietta Blythe, CEO of Open Doors UK in Ireland, has told Newsweek that, quote, the persecution of Christians around the world is one of the great untold scandals of the 21st century. It can take many forms. In North Korea, it may be a summary public execution without trial, merely for owning a Bible. In Eritrea, it can be 10 years spent in a blazing hot prison cell made from a metal shipping container, merely for belonging to an unregistered house church. End quote. According to Open Doors, North Korea is the world leader in Christian persecution. Eritrea comes in at number 4. I was amazed to see that there are 17 nations, virtually all Muslim ones, ranked ahead of China, even though China has become the big brother police state on steroids. Perhaps China ranks lower than some of the others because instead of just killing them, the CCP rounds up Christians like cattle and then makes them disappear. The good news is that persecution often only makes the Christian faith grow rapidly, and we are seeing this happen in many parts of the world. As G.K. Chesterton wrote in his 1925 treatise, The Everlasting Man, quote, Christendom has had a series of revolutions, and in each one of them, Christianity has died. Christianity has died many times and risen again, for it had a God who knew the way out of the grave, end quote. Christianity is widely reported to be the fastest growing religion in China. Protestantism, particularly through house churches, drives much of this expansion. Some estimate that the number of Christians in China has grown from around 1 million to 160 million just since the dawn of the 21st century. This growth is attributed to the appeal of Christian values among urban educated professionals. The number of Christians in China might actually be higher given underreporting and the prevalence of house churches operating in the gray market of religious activity. A Purdue University study recently published in The Economist projects that China's Christian population may actually become the world's largest by as soon as 2030. According to a new study in the China Economic Review, the exponential spread of Christianity and the growth of China's economy may be related. Specifically, they find that robust growth occurs in areas of China where Christian congregations and institutions are prevalent. Based upon data gathered between 2001 and 2011, they found that Christianity has the most significant impact upon economic growth. The study also opines that Christian ethics and social doctrines have an important impact. Christianity emphasizes overall development of human beings and not just economic development. For instance, the Christian duty to be accountable to God and to fellow believers tends to cause legal and rational investment behavior. One clear implication is that the government policy of highly restricting religion, including allowing local government officials to destroy and deface churches in Wenzhou, often called China's Jerusalem, must be reconsidered. Such restrictive policies undermine an important source of China's economy. Just as China radically deregulated its economy with successful outcomes, further deregulation of religion would be yet another way to keep China's economic miracle going for decades to come. That's food for thought. In fact, it appears that we could really use some serious religious persecution right here in the West. What we are experiencing now is being described as the Great Unchurching. The US and Canada are experiencing their fastest religious shift in modern history. It is marked by a rapid increase in the religiously unaffiliated and many church closures. In Canada alone, over 600 churches have been burned since 2017. That is per official Government of Canada statistics. This matters because the great unchurching of the West comes as identity and reality are increasingly shaped by non-institutional spiritual sources. such as YouTube mystics, TikTok tarot, digital skeptics, folk saints, and AI generated prayer bots. When facing the fire of persecution, what we do or not believe suddenly becomes crystal clear. Throughout history, tyrants have tried but failed to stamp out the lamplight of Christianity. The same is now true of our own time. Countless believers around the world are choosing imprisonment or even death rather than to deny Christ. If faced with that same decision, what would you choose? Well, it is well worth thinking about that because global persecution of Christianity is only going to intensify in the challenging years to come. Christians are now the most persecuted religious group in the entire world. Currently, the Bible is illegal or restricted in over 50 countries worldwide, and almost 400 million Christians suffer severe persecution for their faith. Yet this is something we are not reading about in the media, and their silence on this issue is deafening. According to a report by Intersociety, 30 Christians are killed in Nigeria every single day. That report also estimates that around 125,000 Christians have been killed in the past 16 years by militant groups in Nigeria, where almost 50% of the population identifies as Christian, two-thirds of whom are Protestant. Christians in Algeria face similar persecution. Recent years have seen a crackdown on Christianity, with systemic closure of churches and targeted court cases against Christian leaders. Consequently, nearly all Protestant churches in Algeria have either been forcibly shut down or face the imminent threat of closure. According to reports, Christians are also being heavily harassed as church monuments are vandalized and destroyed. For the past 2 years, the media wrote every day about the conflict in Gaza. But for much longer than that, they completely ignored the religious persecution of Christians in Gaza, the West Bank, and even Israel. Last year, Israeli settlers lit fires around an ancient 5th century church in Tabay, a tiny village in the West Bank inhabited by Christian Arabs. Tabay was known as Ephraim in the Bible and is mentioned in John chapter 11, verse 54. In Gaza, Christians have lived under persecution from Hamas for years. While the war was ongoing, Christian organizations aided the persecuted church and are still warning that the 2,000-year-old community could vanish completely, as many Christians are now leaving Gaza due to the constant state of war there. Here in the West, we still enjoy freedom of religion, although many countries like the UK, Norway, and even Canada are introducing laws targeting Christians. We cannot know how long this freedom will endure, but the Bible tells us not to fear and to instead be of good cheer. Quote, "These things I have spoken unto you, that in me ye might have peace. In the world ye shall have tribulation, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world." That's from John chapter 16, verse 33. In October of 2024, MP Jamil Javani of the Conservative Party of Canada asked, by a of official party question, how many Christian churches had been burned in Canada since 2017. The number is staggering. 436 churches were burned in Canada between 2017 and 2023. We Canadians must begin to see these church burnings as a state-sanctioned operation. It is the silence in the face of knowledge. It is the gaslighting. We know that when other religions do not get along with each other, that is one thing. But when a government has set out itself against a religion, it is a very dark thing indeed. And no one is talking about the real story. We likely have over 600 burned churches in Canada since 2017. And this attack is happening because Christians and Christianity built the modern world and founded Western culture. The enemies of Christianity wanted to destroy all of that. They seek to return us to a state of tribal barbarism, like that which dominates most of the nations where Christians are being persecuted today. They want to throw all of us to the lions. the way that the pagan Romans did in the days of the Great Circus. They seek that kind of power again and know that the only way it can be achieved is by wiping away all vestiges of the faith which civilized the world. Let us therefore take a look at what a world without Christians might look like. If you drop someone from the ancient world into the present, the thing that would shock them most would not be jet planes or cell phones. It would be how much we care about people who cannot do anything for us. Christianity did not cause the Dark Ages, it ended them. Christianity is often blamed for the so called Dark Ages, but when the true causes of the darkness of that period are explored, Christianity instead rises as a champion for a new age of recovery and rebuilding. The unifying spirit of the church and preservation of ancient learning and literature by monastics were two key factors helping to reorganize Europe after the fall of Rome. Hospitals, orphanages, charities, schools for everyone. Such things did not exist in the pre Christian world. The Greeks had philosophy and theater, the Romans had roads and armies, but they did not have an idea that seems obvious to us that every human life is precious. That concept is so normal now that we forget it springs from Christianity. In fact, most of the institutions we take for granted today started as Christian experiments, not because anyone set out to build civilization, but because Christians kept acting on their core belief that people matter. Once we commit to that idea fully, society begins to reorganize itself around it. The ancient world had doctors, but no hospitals the way we think of them. If someone were poor or contagious, then nobody wanted to deal with them at all. Early Christians flipped this on its head. They saw the sick as deserving of care, not abandonment. During plagues, when everyone else headed for the hills, Christians remained and nursed the dying, often perishing themselves as a result. And over time, this compassion became a cultural institution we know as hospitals. Around 370 BC, St. Basil built what we would recognize as the first real hospital with wards, staff, and a mission to care for the sick because their lives matter. Not elite lives, not noble lives, not only Christian lives, just lives. Every hospital today, whether public or private, secular or religious, is built upon this same moral logic that Christianity introduced. Ancient Rome had no social services. If a child were unwanted, then the parents often just left it outside to die, and this was commonplace. It was Christians who started picking up these cast-offs and then raising them as their own. The practice became so widespread that by the 4th century, bishops were setting aside money specifically to support abandoned children. This is how orphanages began, because believers refused to let kids die on the roadside. The same also happened with charity. People donated food, clothes, and money simply because they believed that generosity is part of following God. Over time, this too became organized. Almshouses, soup kitchens, shelters, etc. The first universities grew out of Catholic monasteries. For centuries, monks had been the only people reading and copying books. They tried to preserve scripture and with it, literacy. Eventually, these monastic communities became sites of learning. Teachers appeared, and by the 11th century, Europe had something entirely new: formal communities of scholars. Paris, Bologna, Oxford, Cambridge, Wittenberg, Edinburgh. These places taught theology, philosophy, law, medicine, all grounded in the idea that truth was worth pursuing for its own sake. This is the Christian mindset, that truth exists and that seeking it is noble. You can still see it in all of the Latin mottos inscribed into hallowed university gates. Veritas, Dominus illuminatio, mea in lumine, vidibus lumen, quacumque vera. These are reminders that higher learning started as a Christian project. Even science was a Christian invention. This is the part that some people argue about, but it is actually very straightforward. Science first appears in Christian Europe, not in Greece or in China, and certainly not in the Islamic world. Why? Because Christianity gave Europeans a useful belief that the universe has rules because God is rational, and those rules can be discovered to the betterment of mankind and to the glorification of the Creator. Roger Bacon was a friar who pushed for evidence and experiments. Mendel was a monk who founded genetics. Kepler said that he was, quote, thinking God's thoughts after him, end quote. Isaac Newton wrote more on theology than he did on physics, and they all used their minds to understand and reveal the secrets of creation. And then there are laws, rights, and the idea that power has limits. Rome had laws, but they existed to protect the state, not her citizens. Christian thinkers brought something entirely new to the conversation. The idea that every human, even the poorest, has dignity, stemming from the fact that they were made in the image of God, the imago Dei. And if that is true, then no ruler, not even a king, a Caesar, an emperor, or a pope, could treat people as disposables. That is the essence of natural rights, which underpin the idea that governments are accountable to something higher than themselves. It shaped documents like the Magna Carta, the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence, and every constitution enshrined into law by modern democracies. Liberals like to tell us that human rights are secular and therefore granted by government, but that is false. They are built upon the Christian assumption that the individual matters more than the state. Without that assumption, everything collapses back into power, which just might be the very best explanation for why Christians are under attack by totalitarian regimes throughout much of the world today. Art, music, and architecture are all part of the Christian tradition too. The great cathedrals, Chartres, Notre Dame, Cologne, St. Paul's, Westminster, the Sistine Chapel, were all built to express transcendence, hope, order, and light. Stained glass is scripture in living color. Then there's the music. Chant, polyphony, eventually Bach, Handel, and Vivaldi was choral prayer. Even today, if you are not religious, you still feel something when you walk into a cathedral. It is architecture expressing transcendent meaning. Christianity taught Europe that beauty could point beyond itself. Compare the architecture of European Christendom to that produced in the Eastern Bloc countries under atheistic communist tyranny. Cement bunkers, often without windows, soulless monoliths are what the Soviet Union built. What is so remarkable is that none of this came from a central plan. There was no committee deciding, let us invent hospitals, or let us build universities, or let us care for orphans. Christians just kept taking their own beliefs seriously. That people matter, that truth matters, and that creation is intelligible. When we act upon those beliefs long enough, they beget institutions. And when enough institutions accumulate, you get a great civilization. That is basically the story of the West. It was built by people who believe that love, truth, and human dignity are real. Even now, in this secular age, the Western world still runs on those assumptions. The challenge is simple. We want to keep the institutions which Christianity built, but we do not want to be bound by the moral worldview that produced them. That is incoherent and also unsustainable. We in the West can coast on borrowed moral capital for only so long, and our time is up. The world we live in today exists because Christians behaved as if every person matters. They gave their lives for that belief. So did Christ himself. Many Christians throughout the world still are today. That is why they are so much under attack in places like China, India, Nigeria, Algeria, and North Korea. Whether we like it or not, that same idea, given as a great commission by our Lord and Savior, remains the foundation beneath our own feet. We close with a quotation from Augustine of Hippo, which reads, "The truth is like a lion. You don't have to defend it. Let it loose, and it will defend itself."